Yeah.
Hey Ben, how you doing?
Hi, Marcus. How are you? Good. I'm good.
I'm good. So thanks for joining us on today's Screen Time, which is the Virtual Design Festival's live interview series sponsored by Enscape. Ben, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. And turn your phone off.
Yeah, we we have UN Studio. UN Studio is a company of 300 people. We are located in so many locations, luckily enough, because that helped us over the last weeks. That we could collaborate together, got some work in, luckily enough, again from China and South Korea. We of course we are not only an architectural company alone. We over the years we have developed ourselves in the direction of urban planning, product design, interior design. With the 300 people we have right now, we like it that we also use new tools for design. So we work with futurists in the office. We have data specialists. We work with new forms of knowledge management, as we call it. So I always like it to improve innovation in the way how we produce our products or ideas in general. I would like to say.
Actually, I just thought of an interview that we did a couple of years ago. I think it was at the time when you launched UN Sense, your kind of startup element of your business. And you said at the time that architecture was stuck in the, what was it you said? It was stuck in the pre-iPhone era. In the what?
In the Walkman phase. So the building industry in general. I said the building industry in general and architecture in general, you could say, maybe not alone, but our whole industry is still in the Walkman phase, I said. And if you look at the development of cars and how many, in a car is maybe you can find, especially in the Tesla, you can find 300 sensors, and in buildings maybe three. So I believe that technology can really help us to understand a bit better the performance of buildings. So that's why we set it up UN Sense, and I will talk about it a bit later on.
Cool. And just quickly then, has the architecture world moved out of the Walkman era since we spoke, or has it still got a lot of catching up to do?
A lot of catching up to do. But we are, I think slowly we are, as architects, maybe step out of it, but hopefully the building industry is following us in that, because especially the building industry in itself, it also needs to hopefully improve a bit more.
And where are you calling us from, Ben? Are you in Amsterdam in your office right now?
In Amsterdam, yes. I'm luckily enough in Amsterdam. In the last weeks, I tried very hard to, of course, be in touch with everyone. And that meant that instead of, I don't want to say 40 hours in a week flying, but maybe 40 hours flying in a month, I had more or less 17 Skypes a day. But it worked. Luckily enough, it worked.
Which do you find more tiring, the flying or the video conference calls?
Oh, that's a good question. That I find Skyping crazy tiring. I don't know what it is, but it is maybe the concentration you need more, or the intensity of the dialogues and I'm often sitting there with a noise reduction headphone on because I'd like to focus on the conversation, but I felt really often extremely tired over the last weeks. Yeah.
We did a live interview last week with Space Popular. There's a London architecture studio who are super interested in virtual reality and things like that. And they said that the reason people get so tired on Zoom calls and Google chats and Skype calls is because you're fighting to pick up on the visual clues that you would get in the physical world, which is easy. And if you're in a room with someone, you can easily understand if somebody's happy or if they're a bit cross or if they're trying to say something and feel a bit inhibited. Whereas on a screen, you're constantly searching for those clues and you can't find them. So that's why your brain is working like 100%. That's why they think you get so tired.
But I think it's also having to, I discovered maybe why I wanted to become an architect, because I discovered over the last weeks that I like it so much to work with people, to be with people, to work in, and I will talk also a little bit about it later on, but it is quite exhausting to talk to everyone with who you work so long and who became often, close friends in a way, who you cannot really physically meet. I find it maybe the most tiring.
And just before we started the interview, you were talking Dutch to a colleague there. And you told me a little anecdote about what Zaha said to you once about the Dutch language.
No, I said to you, don't you find the Dutch language a funny language? Because it's so, staccato in the way how it sounds. And when Zaha heard, when I was a student of Zaha, because I was with her at the AA in the 80s, but when she heard me speaking in Dutch, she said, "Oh, Ben, it sounds so amazing, but do you really know, or do you know who invited the Dutch language?" And then I said, "No, how could I know?" And then she said, "Yeah, it is Walt Disney." And I said, "Walt Disney, why do you, that's funny." And she said, "Yeah, because of Quick, Quack, and Quack. And Donald Duck." It sounds like that. And I thought it was very funny how she, but she
it's
was
funny.
she was
people
like,
who didn't know Zaha thought that she was very serious, grumpy. There was all kinds of things said about her, but she was really funny, wasn't she, in real life?
No, I don't think that I told you ever. Another funny story is that when I was a student of hers, we were only there with 5 students, because she said in that time to Alvin Boyarski, "I don't want to have more than 5 students, and I'm not going to teach anymore at the AA because it's too tiring for me. And I want to teach from my studio and home." And Alvin said, "Yeah, gosh, I need to keep you on, so let's agree with that." So that was so funny, because then we often had a situation where she would call me and she said, "Ben, I think we have had tutorials for a week or 2 weeks. So can you phone the others and then and buy a chicken on the way?" She said, "if you come to my home." And then we would cook together at her place. And then, I learned everything from rice cooking to everything, how to cook from her, actually. And then after the cooking, we would go into the project. So, she was really amazing in that sense. She was great fun.
So as well as being a pioneer of architecture, she was also a pioneer of homeworking then.
Yeah, she was. Nobody knows. She lived in a very compact apartment, and she did everything herself. She was a great cook, and I think she cleaned it all herself. She was really amazing in the way how she organized her life. Yeah.
Anyway, it's great to hear about Zaha, but really we're here to hear about you and UN Studio. So do you want to fire up your short presentation?
Yes. Great, thank you. So I do that from here. Do it this way. En hier ga ik weer uit. Ja, daar ga ik weer uit. Okay, great. Super. Thanks. Okay. Yes, I sorry for the instructions I get here, but I need to know also how I can go out of this presentation. But yes, as I promised, I will talk a bit about UN Studio's organization and strategy, but UN Sense I already talked about. But as I said, we like this united network strategy, as the name is coming from there towards the way how we came to UN Studio, because collaboration is our way of working. We have always said that in being in this network, that it is so important to be an actor as an architect in the network. And I'm not the one who invented this idea. It was Bruno Latour who already talked about these ideas in the 90s. But being a network strategist is something we have always liked to work in. When it comes down the way in the way how we collaborate and organize ourselves. So we don't stand in front of the orchestra, we say often as an architect, but we walk in between the orchestra as we operate as architects. We are, as I said, we are based in several locations, and that helped us really over the last weeks to do that, because when for instance China went into lockdown, we learned everything from them in Shanghai and Hong Kong specifically, how we had to deal with that later on in Amsterdam. And there are so many other advantages I've learned in the way how we collaborate together in these different offices, because even when you do competition, but you can't finish in the last 2 weeks in an office in Amsterdam, sometimes then you can get support out of other corners from the world from your colleagues. So this is always having had a fantastic advantage for us. How can I go to the next slide? Yeah, so and for today, I thought maybe it would be good to talk about 2 topics, or maybe one overall topic, and that is that I do believe that our agenda has never been so clear, or this clear, I better say, than today. Because if you think about the Paris Agreement, all the discussions we have about sustainability and CO2 reduction, the way how, particularly now, the last weeks, we have to deal with our climate, not alone, but especially our health. I think that is one of the most important things we think we need to deal with. I think there is a little problem here. Wait a minute. Yes. So that's better. So what I'm saying, it's the topics around sustainability, health, the way circularity is coming up majorly in the briefs of our clients, water transition, energy transition, everything is really so much driving towards that direction that is maybe somewhere I think we as architects are responsible for taking that also up in our own briefs. And that means that we need to rethink the new organizational models and think of new ways of how we densify. Is it in the way how we rethink buildings who we can transform from an office, for instance, towards housing, needs to be already incorporated in the design, I often say. So yeah, this is the reason why I think our brief has never been this clear. And let me tell me a little bit also here about how technology plays for us always an important role in the way how we design. And that is not that I say that technology is the only way and the only tool we should work with, because I still believe in very clear tactile rules we can work with as well, so sketching and painting and making models, etc. But technology gave us an enormous amount of insights in the way how we've worked over the last 30 years, and particularly, of course, the last 20 years. But we were really early with it, because already in the 90s we used computational 3D modeling techniques in order to build a bridge in Rotterdam, and that was in 1996. Yes. So, and I can maybe tell about it after the presentation. But what I'm showing here in these slides is that over the years we have learned that with new parametric models, as we used in the beginning, but later then with new BIM technologies, we enriched with our own programs that we could become more efficient in the way how we could build much faster our projects and design them faster, with maybe less specialists over the time. Although I noticed that the specialists are growing now lately with all the topics I mentioned around sustainability and energy transition and health, for instance, then of course you need more on that level, more specialists. But But what I mean in the design process, we can be much more compact in the way how we've designed. So with the Raffles City project, we took close to 10 years to build a project. And now with the Wasser Tower, we do that in 6 years. And here you see from 2018 that we started this project on the South Bank in Melbourne. and the ambition is to finish it in 2024. But then still there will be a lot of interior work to be related to the 2 years we need for the finishing off of the tower. But you see, the bigger the projects get, the quicker we can do them, and that is all having to do with the way how now with technology we can be much more advanced in the way how we produce architecture. And that is not my ambition alone, because this is about the production of architecture. But if we look at the performance of architecture, we've already also there in the beginning of 2000 used techniques, what we call deep planning strategies, whereby we looked at user groups in the city, the way how the city uses, like from the residents to the people who work in the city or visitors coming to the city, how they would use which part of the site, what kind of infrastructure they would use, how they would use public spaces, and how they would use that in time. And with this, we could start to plan our projects much better, because we started to argue with our clients that it was not so important to look at the value of the ground, but that where people move on these grounds. Because if you would have a fantastic shop, but you would have no people, then of course you would have no shop. So in a way, we start to argue that the way how people use the city and how you can bring them together, how you can generate with that a form of liveliness is very important. Or soften with that also the density in certain area and distribute people over different quarters of the city is a tool where we have worked with for a long time. But it started already, as I said, in the beginning of 2000 to use these tools more intensely. And with this, we have learned that you can organize with this not only different pathways in the city, but also within buildings. For instance, a nice example is a museum we've worked on. That's also quite an early design, but I'd like to use it as an example, whereby we use the 88 ways of experiencing the collection. But this was introduced in the design because the client believed that it was impossible to have 1,000 visitors in a weekend with all the regulations of the building, fire regulations, etc., to guide them in the right way around. And then we gave them a tool in order to structure that a little bit better in a way whereby here these groups or these pathways would experience and explore the museum in a totally different way than a linear model would give, and also that they would not actually cross each other, or maybe if they would cross each other, then still you could distribute this density of 1,000 people coming to this museum in a day or in a weekend in a totally different way than in another traditional way. And this actually is a way also how we often look at cities as well, and the way how we organize cities and work with density in cities quite a lot. And I believe that this tool could also be for today, especially now with the way of how we have to rethink of how we can use museums or stations or airports to think more in different pathways and routes is going to be, I think, an interesting way to think about our designs and particularly the way how we design them in a healthier way and preventive way. And that brings me to another project. I think you might notice it is a design we did once for the city ring of Amsterdam, where we introduced another type of density we worked with in again another totally different organizational model than the traditional model as we know it from the rings as we see them or we know them right now. Like if we would drive in the next 5 to 10 years more with electric cars, and with that, as we did here in this study, we can reduce the profiles of the roads and the rings. Then I do believe that that will generate a much better profile for the ring, and we would generate much more space around the ring. And then it would be, again, much more nicer to live around these roads, because now they're noisy, they generate a lot of dirt in the air. So then these rings could become wonderful boulevards. And with that, you could maybe drive into a hub, a place where you can store your electric car or park your car. Maybe the car could generate then a lot of electricity for the neighborhood. And from this car, or from this hub, sorry, you could actually then take a bike or an underground tram or a city pod to go to the city center of Amsterdam, and then loosen up also the amount of traffic in the city center. And you know, it's already happening in many cities in the world, whereby in Spain, in Norwegian, they're talking about loosening up in Oslo, for instance, the city centers by taking out the cars in the next coming future. And this will give, again, the environment a much healthier quality, because by that people can walk on the streets. Streets can become public spaces. Kids could play on the streets. You could use it to make much more unity and neighborhood friendly environments, whereby people can be less alone, as we know. I mean, in Holland, I don't know what the situation right now is in England or in London, but in Holland we have around 30 to 40% people who live alone, and in Amsterdam I think it's close to 40 to 50% people who live alone, and often through technology, as we have noticed actually badly, and what was of course necessary, but what was not always so nice, is to be secluded from your friends and your neighbors and your community. So I do believe community building is one of the most important ways of stimulating healthier cities in the future. So it's not dealing with physical health and you could say mental health in the way how you need to work on our cities in the future, but particularly social health. And as you know, I for a while, or still, I can say, because Harvard asked me back to do this research on health and the built environment over the next years. I've done this study over health and the built environments to its density, actually, in Harvard over these years, and learned that that it is so important to work on these things. So another project, and I noticed that I need to speed up.
No, it's okay. There's no hurry.
Okay, so another project we work on in Helmond is a project whereby we use a much looser density of only 1,500 homes, whereby here we use also technology, but also, I mean, not particularly technology alone in the density we use here, but particularly the topics I mentioned around energy transition, water harvesting, and recycling strategies, and particularly food production, in the way how that can stimulate people to communicate better with each other, to build up that social health where I talked about. So here you see that health and technology, with a particular a new type of data platform we place under this whole site, you could say. We give the opportunity people here to use their own data. We will protect these data also, because it's not going to the bigger companies, by using techniques of blockchaining, but particularly also a technique what is used in cyber technology the most, so that it really is not leaking out of the neighborhood, these data, that people can share these data in order to stimulate ideas around sustainability. And if you can produce in a small community energy, then also here the idea is that you can maybe sell that to other parties in the neighborhood. And you might think, why Helmond? But Helmond is in the south of Holland, and actually it's in the area whereby people are connected to a lot of bigger startup companies, like Tesla is there, Philips is there, and particularly in this area of Eindhoven, people like it a lot to live in these forward-looking neighborhoods. And we talked to quite a potential group of users who bring us also these ideas of stimulating also entrepreneurial ideas of how food production cannot only be used for the people here in the neighborhood alone, whereby it creates this social cohesion, but that it also can be sold to others in the neighborhood. So density can be organized around many ways. This is a project in Frankfurt we are building right now, whereby we intensified a neighborhood what was closed off for the city for more than 45 years. And with this, we came with the right mix of user groups, as I explained, through the deep planning strategy. But particularly here, we also want to make this part of the city much more livelier. And as I said, monofunctionality in the way how we have built cities is something where I have noticed many city owners, many city planners don't like that anymore, because they think that that is not anymore the future. One should actually make sure that the social cohesion, that you feel safe in the neighborhood, that you, especially here in Frankfurt, you have a lot of offices who are to be found in the city center. If you walk around that area 8 o'clock in the night, I mean, it's totally unpredictable, and people feel unsafe in this neighborhood. So by creating these new forms of programs on this location, people can also use here a form of liveliness and set of amenities, I should say, whereby they can meet also each other. And you know that we use that lately, neighborhoods in the sky, that you don't make these neighborhoods only in the planning strategy, as I explained in Helmond, but also that you can use that in vertical planning, like we do here in a project in Melbourne. We just received last week fantastic news that we got the permission to start building this project, and the city of Melbourne is quite amazingly happy with this, because it generates an enormous amount of work for the city and a new economy. So that's why it was front news in Melbourne. But here, this idea of the collective neighborhood structure and using food production, bringing in the landscape into the building, using a lot of activities on the ground floor, and stimulate walkability. I mean, maybe I forgot to say that, but walkability is something I really bring into almost all our designs, to make sure that people don't take the elevator anymore. I even hide sometimes our elevators in the buildings, so that people walk much more in the built environment, to stimulate with that also a better health condition than we do in traditional buildings. So as I said, for me here, I'd like to promote this idea of new forms of strategies around the way how we densify, flexible density, you could say it, where we need to deal with in the future, new forms of resilience, and the way how it can be designed, especially around maybe the topic of health and sustainability. Yeah, and you know, I can go on, but then architects can talk for hours, so let's be careful. I stop here.
Thanks, Ben. And you talked about the importance of building community, but how do you do that? You talked about in the Helmond project, there's the use of technology that's kind of hermetically sealed so that Google or whoever can't get hold of it. But how do you actually create community, either in a sort of more horizontal development like Helmand, or in these more vertical developments in cities? How do you actually bring people together and create? Or do you mean by community, do you mean people actually physically coming together, or do you mean some other?
No, that is, yeah, no, agree. I mean, that they physically meet each other more. I don't know if you know that, but you have that, I think, also in certain parts of London as well. In the 70s, 80s, 90s, and also even in the beginning of 2000, we built these neighborhoods where people had not the amount of the right programs to be connected to their homes. So they would not meet. There were not enough shared community spaces where they could meet. And what I mean by creating social communities is by bringing people really together, by producing food together, and setting up a system for that they make themselves responsible for that, and that they take together care for these gardens, these common gardens, or the commons as you know them in England also, where they work together on these gardens. That's one way of dealing with the community. But that you have also more sport activities in the way how you do that together. That you have community spaces, even ways of sharing information with each other, that you can take care of each other, etc. So in many projects over the years, we have brought also in the vertical projects more amenities in the higher parts of the building, so that people would have a clubhouse, for instance. Because sometimes people might like to live a bit smaller when they're alone, and then maybe when there is a party, or a birthday party, then they could never bring 40 people in their home. So a little community space will create these possibilities to bring people more together.
Obviously, during the pandemic, these last couple of months, people have not been able to go out and meet in public. So community has had to be changed. Do you think there will be any long-term legacies of this particular situation? I mean, the pictures of the people happily gardening in Helmand feels more like the things that we're doing now, those of us that are lucky enough to have gardens, whereas people whizzing around shopping centres and jumping in their cars is not what people are doing now. How much do you think this current lockdown situation will permanently change cities and the work that people like you do, or will it just disappear and we'll forget about it?
No, I hope it will not totally disappear, or at least it might be so that maybe in a half year time or year time we might go back to traditional and old patterns. I'm sure that will happen in some ways, but I do believe that it is important to learn from what we have discovered over the last months, and particularly that what you said about how wonderful it is sometimes to smell the air, who is today much cleaner than we had it before, or that you feel that you need to work on other topics around the way how you can meet each other much better, or that you, I mean, honestly, I said before to you before we started to enter the conversation that it is quite tough to be so isolated and to work from home and to have all these Skypes, etc. But on the other hand, in my neighborhood, we have an app, and people really talk a lot about what we need to improve in the neighborhood, and the form of loyalty and trust in the way how people need each other today has been, of course, especially in the healthcare, I would say, and you've seen how beautiful that group of people worked so positively with each other. I think that is something we should really keep on working on and bring it to the next future. So I hope that everything what we learn from today is transformed in the way how we reactivate that in our designs in the future. As well. Yeah, especially as I said, the topics of health in our built environment. I hope we bring that further.
When you showed the project, the Ring projects is that in Amsterdam? where
Yes.
you build these hubs. The proposal is to build hubs so people drive to the hubs, they park their car, and then they get on a bike. Again, what this coronavirus situation has shown us is that maybe instead of finding more sustainable ways for people to travel, they don't need to travel at all, and we can all stay at home more and stay in our local neighborhood more. Do you think that maybe we've all been pursuing the wrong policy by trying to transfer unsustainable travel to more sustainable travel, whereas in fact we could just not have travel?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's in a way what I'm also saying. In a way, I'm saying yes. I mean, we should use the car only there where it's necessary. Let's go all electric. If we can be so determined on the way how we've regulated things over the last months, why could we not so now also be quite determined in the way how we organize, in the way how we travel? Would it not be great if we would have city centers who are much more friendlier towards the people who live there? I mean, now they are hollowed out by, I mean, we have felt it a lot in Amsterdam by so many visitors and places who are actually, used for so many visitors that it became too intense. And not that you cannot have visitors, because we embrace it a lot in Holland. We love it that we are an international place. But I mean by the way how we structure and organize tourism, we can rethink that, and particularly in the way how we use mobility. I think that is a good point. We can maybe find new ways of loosening up mobility and stimulate more walkability. I mean, if you would learn people how quick you can walk or bicycle from one place to the other, as you know, we are a bicycle culture here. I can do 20 things in a day on my bike. Where I use the car, I can only do 3 things in a day, because where can you park? So I think that the lessons to be learned of how we can use other forms of mobility needs to be given also a bit more proof to the people who, and hopefully I hope that technology will help there, that people can see, oh yes, if I take the bike and I combine it with this and that, what I do, and I shop, and I go to that, I go to the, I mix all my activities in the day with these and these tours I have to do through the city, then I can be faster than using the car. I think that needs to be educated maybe to a new way of using mobility. Yeah, I believe that you're totally right there.
Again, in the Hellman project, there's a beautiful picture of people gardening together, like a community gardening project, I guess. And you mentioned that is something that I think you said that people in that region already cooperate like that. I mean, the Dutch have managed to be the most sophisticated nation in terms of agricultural efficiency, but do people also enjoy growing things with their friends? Is that part of the culture of the Netherlands? So instead of just going to the supermarket and buying your food, people are actively involved in producing it?
No, it's growing. Luckily enough, the whole idea of producing your own food is a huge topic in Holland. And luckily enough, a bit more in the world also. I noticed that a lot of specialists we talk to. But it is so particularly that we are a bit angry somehow in Holland that we are somehow one of the most important food producers, and how do you say that? That we all, I mean, we transport a lot of food from one place to the other place through Holland. We are, I think, somewhere the second there in the world, I believe. So, but all that food needs to travel to your plate, and you don't want to know how much kilometers that food needs to travel. It's around maybe 33,000 kilometers for all that food you get on your plate. I think it's ridiculous. Why can't we not produce much more cleaner and better food in the way how we live today? And I honestly can tell you that not everything can be produced in that neighborhood what we have there. But if we've done a study that if we would use in a circle of 10 kilometers the farmers around the neighborhood, then we can produce close to 60 to 70% of all the food of people who live there. So, but that again needs collaboration and new ways of working and creating new forms of insights in the way how you can educate people around this. Yeah, but people like it. Yes, we've noticed that people like it.
Because in the UK, there's more of a culture of growing food individually. We have allotments where people will go and have a small piece of land and they grow food as partly as a hobby and partly for health reasons. But it's almost as if there's two different models. There's the city model that you're showing where you can grow plants on your balcony or on your rooftop, but also the Helmand model is more like a traditional village. Do you think that after all of the scare of the virus, people will want to be less dense, or at least to feel more horizontal, to feel less in the middle of a big urban space? Because in some ways, density is the perfect conditions for coronavirus to infect people, isn't it?
Well, yeah, maybe that was maybe not so fully, not so clear in my story that in the forms of density where I talk about, I talk about several forms of density we can think of, like the mobility forms of density we talked about, the flexible density we can create there. But the same is to be said in the way how people would like to live in the future. I'm sure, yes, that people would like to live a bit more spacious and live in a community where they can do these things with each other, where they feel that they are not so, yeah, have to be careful with maybe the over-densified places where we live in right now. But on the other hand, I'm saying, don't forget that in cities, people like it when they are alone, when they have a bit more opportunity to meet different people over there and use a bit more facilities around them. So, and as I said, so many people live alone in Amsterdam for 40 to 50% in the city here, that you need to create for that new forms of community building. So it's either or who you think that density needs to be built for. It's quite diverse, but I think we need to rethink these models and make them more maybe resilient, because I forgot to bring in another topic, but because of the time I could not bring that into the slides I had. But for instance, lately a lot of clients ask me how we did a project here in Amsterdam, what is an office tower project, what can be turned into housing, for instance. We designed the building so with all the columns in the right shaft in the right place with the right amount of daylight going in, so that this office building can be turned into housing if it is necessary. And this is where I'm also talking about when I talk about flexible density. So and maybe when I talk about the user groups particularly, then don't forget that the user groups we had 20 years ago, or the family constellations, better to say, there were only maybe 10 family constellations. Now we have 40. The family constellations are so diverse and so inclusive and so complex right now that we also have to think about that. So who are these users in the future of where and how they're going to live in these new forms of density? Yes. And related to the topic of health and prevention, like you say, because that's what I like. I think that topic of prevention is definitely going to be playing a very important role in the future of design, I'm sure.
And you spoke a few times about liveliness, about how in Frankfurt, for example, you go to the city centre at night or the financial district at night, and it's very quiet, and you almost equated quiet with being frightening. But I think one of the things I've learned from this current situation is sometimes it's quite nice to be quiet. I don't quite crave busyness quite as much as I used to.
Yeah,
so
but
do you think that we should maybe be designing
no,
more quietness in the city?
No, I've seen never so many photographers going on the streets over the last weeks in Amsterdam, photographing the city empty. That constantly you hear that people saying, "Wow, I mean, is it not beautiful to have an empty city. And no, I totally agree. But you know, that is another form of density again, forced density we couldn't predict. But the beauty of it I also like. But don't forget, I mean, I'm talking maybe about a form of insecureness when you're coming out of a station, maybe 10 o'clock in the night, and you really feel that you step in an empty station where you know you don't see anyone else. And yeah, you know, I mean, I'm not the one who's maybe also not so quickly scared, but are people who are nervous about it. They don't like it. They don't feel comfortable if they then walk alone in an empty station, for instance. That kind of backyard feeling is what I'm talking about.
And finally, obviously, you heard that the Sidewalk Labs Smart City project in Toronto got scrapped last week.
Yes.
They said it was due to the coronavirus pandemic, but I think a lot of people think that it was due to different reasons. How do you, if you're developing a smart neighborhood, how do you make sure that the technology, the people who are going to live there realize the technology is for them and not for some Uber corporation that's going to sell the data? How do you get the balance right between technology that helps people live their lives versus surveillance, fears, and invasions of people's privacy, and then commercialization of the data?
No, that's of course a question we got even from the government here in Holland. How do you deal with that? Because it is such an important forefront pilot project in Holland. But I can tell you that project in Toronto, of course, we studied endlessly, and we've talked to also the parties who were there involved. But you know, the problem there was that it was too much oriented towards efficiency, the way how, where, who is shopping where in the neighborhood. You know, it was all about the commercial use of it. It was not dealing about the real important urgent topics of today, like sustainability and community building. And what we did here with this project, we worked endlessly with specialists, like I told you, even cyber technology specialists who gave us the security. And we, you know, maybe one day it would be nice to show you the reports we produced, because they're endless reports, to make sure that the data shared there is kept within the owners of that neighborhood, so that it is not shared with any large company outside that neighborhood. And of course, people can decide to be part of that community, the digital community, you could say. And that is what we want to make sure of, that it is here so that technology stimulates sustainable ways of living, testing the performance of sustainability, so that over the time, you know, I mean, now we all say, yeah, we made a fantastic sustainable building, but what happens with the real production of energy, or the energy neutral building you design over 2 or 3 years? You need to measure that, and that's what we are going to do as well, so that we test the performance of all the innovative ideas we're going to introduce here in a way that it is totally protected from any other company than the people who are producing these new technologies themselves. So yeah, and of course, I mean, like you said, we had major questions and front page criticism in the beginning. Honestly, you can really understand that was a similar question like you asked in the Dutch political environment. But luckily enough, in the debate we had with the politicians, we even got so much support that we now have a group of ministers, or particularly one minister, who sees this as one of the most important new pilot projects, where we going to stimulate the idea of the analog. I mean, that's what I want to say, the analog qualities of a neighborhood. It's about community building and people. It's not about technology. It's about the way how we can improve the future neighborhoods then with the support of technology. It's not it's not the other way around.
So is that what went wrong with the Sidewalk Labs project then? The project was more about technology that could be commercialized rather than creating something for people? Is that maybe what went wrong?
More or less, yeah. And that it supports sustainability, health, circularity. I mean, I didn't go into the topic of circularity, but everything around waste use, water, the reuse of water, for instance, everything there will be stimulated and be controlled with this technology. Yeah, and it's people oriented.
And Helmond, has that started construction yet? When will that be? When will there be something to see of that project?
Soon. I think we start already with one of the first projects the end of this year, and the major other projects will be starting up next year. So it's really in development.
And who is the client there? Is it the local authority, or is it a private developer or a landowner? Who are you working for with that project? It's
a fantastic consortium whereby the party of certain parties from the city are involved there. That consortium, the Brainport Smart District, it's called, is actually owning the project, and they organize a quality team where I'm part of that quality team also, so that we stimulate also with each new investor all these ideas we talked about, it's a consortium what is actually stimulating this. But I can tell you, we get endless visitors already of people who want to know of how particularly the data platform is going to operate, not alone, but also people who are interested in living here, because as I said, it is the community around this neighborhood who likes this idea of that we can in the future hopefully live in an environment where innovation takes place. I think that's the reason why it's already I could say in brackets a success.
I was going to ask who is going to live there. Do people have to apply? Do they buy a house, or is there some kind of lottery system, or how do you choose who gets to live in that Helmond project?
We talk to potential users. We invite them. We discuss with them what they like in the project or not. What I forgot to say is that for instance, we like also the idea that not the bigger commercial food suppliers will come in, but that small little entrepreneurial ideas will be set it up also by the people who are interested in this in this neighborhood. And for instance, we talked to a man who said, I used to have a bicycle shop, but I was part of a bigger company, but I'm 68, but I still love to work on bikes. And can I do that in this neighborhood? Can I set up a new little a company for myself to support the neighborhood? And we like all these ideas and support it with these people.
And finally, when you were talking about the Helmond project, you talked about density. So what is the density of the people per, I don't know,
that's a good question.
Compared to the urban projects you talked about, is it comparable in any way? How much density can you achieve while still giving people space for vegetables and gardens and things?
No, we have here close to 1,500 homes on a 150 hectare site. So you have to think of 320 football fields. So that's quite a loose density. And as you could see on the plan, there is a lot of landscape around it, and there is a central park. So that's the beauty of the plan, that we have luckily enough a lot of green around us, but it is low density.
It's low density, and you're okay with designing a low density project, because so many architects they think the density is the answer to everything.
No, but I'm saying to you that is actually there is the future. I do believe in this combination of low density sites and high density sites who can be felt like if they're low density sites. You know, I think the two needs to be combined. And for instance, in Helmond, the idea is that the density starts to hopefully grow in the outdoor world, you know, in not in the home. I mean, density is often felt in the way how we live in the city and how we compact in a compact way organized in the city. But hopefully you might lose up a bit the city structure by taking out the city cars, for instance, and densify in the openness in let's say in low density sites by creating there the density.
We've got a couple of questions up quickly. I know I've kept you on the line for a long time here, but it's been super interesting. Got a question from Anurag Pandey. In vertical development, how hard is it to make more community spaces to increase interaction between users compared to horizontal developments? Because obviously in a village, you just go outside and there's a neighbor there. But whereas if you're living vertically, that doesn't happen so easily. So how do you create community vertically?
I mean, the only way to do that is to cut the different parts of a vertical neighborhood in different neighborhoods, so that you say, well, we have 3 or 4 neighborhoods in the sky. For instance, I used that strategy already in several projects we did in Singapore, whereby we in one tower, for instance, used 4 neighborhoods, and in between these different neighborhoods, we created spaces for a little cinema, for instance, or a little clubhouse, or a sport, or a community garden, like we have on the project in Melbourne, a huge community garden actually, where also people can produce food. So I mean, it's a way of how you organize the verticalness with blocks of neighborhoods, and then have in between spaces where you can share certain spaces. That's the way how to do it. But of course, yeah, it's different.
Do people use those spaces?
Yeah, they call it semi-public. You know, they're used by the owners of the yeah.
Okay, and final question from Abdo Bodhi. How does your design thinking differ from big to small projects?
There's no difference there. In a way, I think that every new project we do is unique. And of course, you need to think of a context and how a project like the Melbourne and Frankfurt project is placed in the fabric of the city. And you need to understand this fabric a little bit more. But I'd like to rethink every project as a new way of looking freshly towards it, and hope to always be inventive there and come up with new ideas. So I can understand that someone likes to think that maybe the design of a chair, what I design also products, as you know, but one might think that is a totally other responsibility you might have than the design of a huge tower for more people. But don't forget, a chair we design now for Arendt, it's going to be, it's a chair what is actually produced by, I think, 40,000 every year, because it's one of their popular chairs we redesign. And there, everything about health, ergonomics, the quality of the way, how it needs to activate people a bit more, that they don't sit all day. For instance, that I mean, that all is actually taking up almost close to a year time of design, like any other building we design. So for me, everything we design with a lot of pleasure and innovation and intensiveness as a big project.
Great. Well, Ben, so good to see you again, and thanks so much for your time.
Great,
and
Marcus.
Soon in the real world, I hope.
Thank you for having this conversation, and I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.